Should Steven Erikson rewrite Gardens of the Moon? That's a clickbaity title. Sorry about that, but you clicked on it. So this whole video stems from what I think is a very interesting discussion, a larger discussion that's happening on the Malazan subreddit right now. I thought there was a very well thought out and articulate post made about someone who, like me, loves Malazan and wants more and more people to find out about it, but also agrees with the common criticism against Gardens of the Moon, and even some extent to Dead House Gates, that the writing style of those books in particular make it difficult for people to enter into the Malazan series, and so, unfortunately, less people get to experience the series as a whole, which this poster that I agree with says is one of the best fantasy of all time. I would say it is the best fantasy ever written up to this point. So I wanted to take on this question of the Gardens of the Moon problem. I'm just going to call it that for the sake of this video. Because if you look at the comments to that post, as normally happens on Reddit, there are two groups that emerge, and it's the opposite extremes. So on one side, there are the people who say, yes, you're completely right, I DNF'd Gardens of the Moon, or I waited years to start the next book, or I read it and thought it was nothing, or I have trouble recommending it to people. Gardens of the Moon has this major problem. Then there's the other end of the spectrum, basically says it's perfect, doesn't need to be changed, it's great on a reread, it foreshadows everything to come in the series, introduces us in a great way, keeps a unique style that is uniquely Erikson. This is the best book ever written, why would you ever change it? And then there's definitely a problem, let's change it. I think it's first important to recognize that both of these groups love Malazan, and that's why they have strong opinions on it, and so I appreciate both perspectives. But to be frank, I think both sides are wrong on this sense. I don't think Gardens of the Moon is a perfect book. You can check out my review. There are problems with it, and it is difficult sometimes to get people through that and onto Dead House Gates, especially because Dead House Gates takes place on a completely other continent with mostly different characters. But I do agree with people who say that that is a uniquely Malazan thing, and it prepares you for the postmodern brilliance that is the Malazan Book of the Fallen as a whole. And so I don't want there to be a rewrite. And also, probably most importantly, I want Steven Erikson to be writing stories and novels and books that he is excited to write. And if he's like most artists, he doesn't want to go back and redo something he's already done. So that's not helpful. And I don't think he owes us anything. I mean, Erikson has already gifted us a fantastic world, and Gardens of the Moon, even with its problems, is a great work of fiction. So I don't want to make this seem like he owes us anything at all. I think fan bases sometimes get a little spoiled, is a nice word for it, when there are things that either disappoint them about their author or just they think very strongly about something. And it's because they are fans, fanatics. But we need to be understanding about this author and his thoughts and feelings. And again, I want him to be writing new stuff. Finish that Karkanos trilogy. The Witness trilogy. Work on those. His science fiction. Like, Steven Erikson should be able to do what he wants. So the original post on Reddit posited, like, what would you want to see in a rewrite of Gardens of the Moon? I am going to reject that premise because I don't think he should rewrite it at all. But I do agree that there is a Gardens of the Moon, or let's call it more broadly, starting Malazan problem. And I want to give solutions to that. I want to be solutions oriented. So this is just a conversation starter. I definitely want to hear what you guys think in the comments below, but here would be my proposal for making Malazan more accessible to new readers. And this is coming from someone, I need to say this. I read Gardens of the Moon and then moved on to Dead House Gates, and the first time I read it, I'm so sorry, but I need to admit this sin, I DNF'd Dead House Gates because I lost a lot of momentum trying to get through Gardens of the Moon and then really hit a wall, especially with the Mappo and Icarium beginning in Dead House Gates. Now, It was good enough. I shouldn't even say it like that. I wanted to come back, and I did come back, and I started over, read it through, and I agree those books are fantastic. Again, you can see my reviews here. I love those books and what they do and the work as a whole. I'm just saying all this to say I can sympathize with someone who has difficulty going through the first time. So my proposal is a prequel. Hear me out. I know prequels often don't work well. One example that I would give that does, I think, work well and give some good context is New Spring, which is the prequel to The Eye of the World. I was going to say trilogy. Definitely not a trilogy. The Wheel of Time series. And it is a prequel to the first book, which is Eye of the World. And I think that book does a great job of giving a very quick background to one of the main characters there, Moraine, and gives some good weight to Eye of the World. It's not necessary if people just want to start with Eye of the World, but it's also kind of a fun place to start, or a small little novella to go back to. My Malazan novella to start this out, I would propose that it could be Ian Esselmont, it could be Stephen Erikson. I think both could tackle this well. And I think the purpose of this novella is to introduce people to the wider Malazan world in maybe a gentler way. Specifically, I think this novella should end with the final battle at the Siege of Pale. So people can read through this first novel and see a full story, because the falling of Pale is the ending to a story. Maybe not the overall story, but is ending to a story. So it's not just a prequel in the sense of it brings us up to the start of something else. It can actually be a full work in itself, just like Knight of Knives. And a little more guidance, I know who it should revolve around. I believe it should revolve around Kalot and Tattersail. That is our basic introduction to the Siege of Pale anyway, in Gardens of the Moon. And I actually think it would be most interesting to do it from a Kalot perspective. Let us get to know him more, have some more weight on that, and I think that will give more weight overall to their relationship in Gardens of the Moon and the things that happen at the Siege of Pale as a whole. I think it would be interesting to go through their story as a love story, as well as you are telling the story of the Siege of Pale and the campaign at Genabacchus. You can even go all the way back to Tattersail during the quelling of unsanctioned magic in Mala City and in the Empire as a whole. Because again, that's something referenced in Gardens of the Moon, but isn't really delved into very deeply, but has a lot of meat on the bone that could go into a very interesting novella. And I picked this particular solution because I think it does a couple of things. One is it will provide you a framework for the Malazan Empire as a whole, the bridge burners, and a couple key characters. And I think almost more importantly, at least a little glimpse at the Warrens and sort of the wider magical times that the Malazan universe takes place in, so that people can have a better sense of that when they're entering the beginning of Gardens of the Moon. Because for me, particularly, one of the problems was not knowing what kind of magic existed in this world. And so, especially, I didn't know if things were being said metaphorically or real. Is that real lightning coming down? Is that a real moon in the sky? Are those real dragons? Like, all of that stuff was unclear because I didn't know what to expect from this world. Because even for a seasoned fantasy reader, we all know that every world in fantasy is different. That's why we love it. But also when we're just starting out, we're trying to get into our mind exactly what is happening in this world, and especially how Erikson starts out Gardens of the Moon. We don't really get that. I think there's some benefits to that, which is again why I wouldn't want Gardens of the Moon to be changed at all. But for those people who would benefit from a gentler introduction to the world, I think a novella around Kalot and Tattersail is a great plan. Plus, I know Erikson is looking to challenge himself. He said in many interviews he's looking to challenge himself to write in a different way and to find different projects, which is why he moved on to starting the Witness trilogy before finishing the Karkanos trilogy. And I think this could be a good outlet of writing basically a romance inside of this world while still offering framework for the overall story. So there you go. That's my answer to this question and how I think we could solve the problem of the difficulty in getting into Gardens of the Moon while not sacrificing any of the brilliance that is that original book and any of the gold you can find in the hills of rereading that book and the other series in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Is there a Gardens of the Moon problem? Do you like my idea for a K-Lot Tattersale love story as a prequel to help people get into the series? Do you hate it? Like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. First in, last out.